The statement of an intention is a precursor to action. I'm not sure if that's a direct quote, if I'm paraphrasing. I don't have a citation for it, but the concept or the idea behind it is pretty universal. If you say you're going to do something, you're more likely to do it. And that goes for a lot of things, especially if you state things publicly, which is what this video is all about. Because in this video, I'm going to publicly state the next science fiction books that I'm going to read in the next few months. I keep a list of all of the different books that I'm reading across multiple different subject areas. I have this organized in the want to reads, I'm going to read. And you might say, is that a paper version of Goodreads? Yeah, it kind of is. But if you're interested in how I organize my reading lists, let me know in the comments down below and I can talk about how I do have sort of a physical book that I keep track of my reading and why I do that. But that's not what this video is about. This video is about 10 science fiction books that you may look at and go, I can't believe you've read that book. Or you might go, I've never even heard of that book. But these are the books that I'm going to be reading in the next couple of months here. And I'll do reviews here on the channel as appropriate. But let me know if you've heard of some of these books. Let me know if you're interested in some of these books. And I'll let you know how I do with reading these books. So the first books that I'm going to do are going to be classics of science fiction. I'd be surprised if you haven't heard of them. And you may even be shocked that somebody who's interested in reading, interested in science fiction, hasn't read these books. And the first one's an absolute classic. I'm shocked that I haven't read it. I'm a little embarrassed. Well, I'm not embarrassed that I haven't read it. There are always more books to read than time, and there's always those classics that you just never got around to. Well, the first one is Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula Le Guin. Now, this book here is an absolute classic of science fiction. Love the writing by Ursula Le Guin, so there are other works of hers that I've read, but this one in particular is the classic of all classics. This is the book that everybody recommends when it comes to her work, generally speaking, and it's one that I've never read. I almost read this book years ago as part of a course that I was taking, and I'm not a literary. My specialty is technology, so I actually have another YouTube channel called Learning in Technology with Frank. But this particular book is one that I know I should have read. You're probably in the comments below saying, I can't believe you never read that book, but I'm looking forward to reading it. I know a little bit about the themes of this book because, of course, it has been around for a long time, and I think it's going to be an important book to read in terms of understanding the role that science fiction plays in literature. Again, I'm not an English major, but I am working on another project related to this reading of these science fiction books, and this falls into that other project. If you're interested in that, let me know in the comments. That's a secret project. I probably have another video here on the channel, or I will shortly, about that particular science fiction project. So, Left Hand of Darkness, Ursula Le Guin. Sticking with the theme of classics, a writer that I really like the short stories and I've read some of the other works of, but I haven't read this particular book, is Ubic by Philip K. Dick. Now, this particular book, this particular edition is a series of novels by Philip K. Dick. The one that I'm going to read out of this book is Ubic, and I've read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. I was attracted to that one because, of course, Blade Runner. So Blade Runner made me aware of that particular book. So I read that book and I really enjoyed it. And I really thought, I need to read more of his work. And Ubic is one that a lot of people recommend. Apparently, it's one of the best books he's written. It's during his 1960s era. So if you look at this particular book, I have a little set here of his work where we look at his books, 4 novels from the 1960s, and then we have 5 novels from the 60s and 70s, and then we have Valis and later novels. That's a lot of novels. That's a lot of reading. I will eventually read at least several of them, if not all of them, through this collection. But the particular one that I'm reading here is going to be Ubic. Let me know if you've read it, what you think. Do you think I'll enjoy it? We'll find out together. Keeping again with the classics, before we get into some more modern science fiction, this is a book that I haven't read it. It's one of the books that sometimes gets assigned as a school reading book. But this particular book has had an attraction to me I've been attracted to this book for a long time, been wanting to read this for some time, not because of the book or because of what I've heard of the book, but because the movie based upon this book, similar to Blade Runner with Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, but this particular movie called Charlie was inspired by this book. It's an award-winning movie, and that movie was absolutely impactful on me. It really made me look at what does it mean to be part of society? How do we treat people in society? What's the role of cruelty and kindness in society? And the movie Charlie really profoundly affected me, and that leads me to the book Flowers for Algernon. So the movie Charlie is based upon this book. It's again another classic of science fiction. It's one that I really wanted to read for a while. So that's on my list of books that I'm absolutely going to be reading in the short term here. And I'm really looking forward to reading this. I'm wondering how much the book will affect me, given that the movie, which I watched in my preteen years, affected me throughout my whole life. I still think about that movie on a fairly regular basis in terms of what was in that movie. Really profound. So I'm looking forward to this book as well. Now, moving into maybe a bit more of the esoteric science fiction, this again is part of my science fiction project that I'm currently working on. I'm working on a project, just briefly, and I'll have another video here on the channel about this, where I'm trying to look at science fiction from a literary perspective in terms of how science fiction has related to society during the lifespan of science fiction as a form of literature, about 150 years, the past 150 years. So I've gone into reading some pretty interesting science fiction that I never would have approached because I wouldn't have known about it if I had not sort of created a structure to the reading. Now, I'm not a big fan of reading as productivity or reading as an objective. It's reading for pleasure is what I'm all about, but having a little bit of structure, a little bit of guidance, I think is useful. Hopefully this video is going to give you some ideas of books that you may like to read or remind you of books that you like to read. So this book is part of that project again, and that's Hard to Be a God. Now, Hard to Be a God is an interesting book. It's a Russian science fiction. I'm a fan of several Russian authors. Stanislaw Lem comes to mind. A famous book by Stanislaw Lem is, of course, Solaris, a fantastic book. But Stanislaw Lem actually wrote a number of very good science fiction books that I've enjoyed reading. So this one is not by Stanislaw Lem, but this one is, again, the Russian sort of cultural identity will hopefully come out in here. The era that it was written in. So it's a translated one. This particular book should be interesting. I've heard interesting things. It's considered to be one of the best books by the authors, and it is something that I'm excited to read from the perspective of classic science fiction or science fiction that relates to the world of its time. So that's kind of the classics of science fiction that I'm going to be reading fairly quickly here in terms of understanding. The other classic I do not have a physical copy of the book, so I'll be reading it on my Kindle, and that is Hyperion. So Hyperion by Dan Simmons. This is a book that won the Hugo Award. This is a book, I think it won the Locus Award as well. This is a book that continuously comes up in conversations. It's more of a modern classic. I think it was the 80s or 90s that it was written in. I think maybe late 80s, early 90s. Somebody can correct me down below in the comments. I'm not going to look it up immediately. But this particular book is one that's part of a series of books. And I thought it would be a very interesting book to read for a few reasons. One is that it deals with artificial intelligence, hot topic right now. So I'm very interested to see a science fiction perspective of artificial intelligence and the extrapolation of what it means when artificial intelligence has matured to the point of time where it is a key component of society. So an interstellar or a multi-star society. This is very interesting to me. So I think this will be a great read. It's something I'm very much looking forward to. For those of you that are science fiction readers, you may be like, well, that's like saying you haven't read Dune. Well, I didn't read Dune until a few years ago. Fantastic book. That's not on this list because I've read it. Dune Messiah could be on this list. Anyways, not talking about Dune, talking about Hyperion, and that book is one that I'm very much looking forward to reading as well. So going into some books that are less well known, the first one is Buffalo is the New Buffalo. This isn't really a novel, it's a collection of short stories. So I'm up here in Canada, and this book is a collection of short stories written by an Indigenous writer. And the reason that I'm interested in this, though, Buffalo is the New Buffalo is a play on a phrase apparently, or a saying apparently, called education is the new buffalo. And I believe that the sentiment of the phrase education is the new buffalo is that for Indigenous culture, one of the ways to thrive and survive and move forward in society and find place is through education. That's near and dear to my heart because I teach for a living. But this one is Buffalo is the New Buffalo, which is a collection of short stories that is speculative and science fiction. The reason I want to read this book is, first of all, I believe that it's good to be aware and informed and understand other cultures, especially cultures that you are living in and with. I'm not living in the Indigenous culture, obviously, but I'm definitely living with and at the benefit of the permission of the Indigenous culture. So I understand that, I am in Canada, which is a country that was founded by Indigenous cultures. So anyways, I'm not going to go into the politics or the societal effects of that. That's pretty deep, far beyond what I'm capable of. But I'm capable of reading a book to help understand Indigenous culture and ideas and thoughts as it relates to speculative fiction or science fiction. And this particular book I picked up because on the radio I heard a review of the book or a conversation with the author about the book, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to pick up that book, and now it's definitely on my soon-to-be-read pile of science fiction books that I definitely am looking forward and interested in reading. So Buffalo is the New Buffalo, Canadian, Indigenous, speculative fiction, and science fiction. A little bit of a deep cut on that one there for a lot of readers. The next one is a book that many of you will be familiar with, sort of like Hyperion, or all the ones, Left-Handed Darkness and Ubic, and those are ones that a lot of people who read science fiction are very well aware of. This one here is the beginning of a series, and this is a fairly new book, Empire of Silence. And this one here is part of the Sun Eater series of books. I'm not sure how far along that series is. I believe it's a fairly new series, so that this will be my jumping on point for that series. Again, hugely positive reviews of this book. It's a science fiction book that I'm interested in. It's people are comparing it to some of the great civilization books out there like Dune, and so this will be an interesting read. I'm looking forward to exploring it and beginning that series. So that one would be Empire of Silence. Looking forward to the Sun Eater series. Then the next book on my list is really based upon a book by the author that I read when I was on vacation. So I was traveling down the Oregon coast, and whenever I'm traveling, if the opportunity arises, I do like to go into little bookstores and sort of see what's the flavor of the bookstore, what's the vibe of the bookstore. I like little, independent bookstores. I like big box. I like ordering online, but basically, I do like visiting little bookstores, and they recommended a book to me called All the Light We Cannot See. So I picked up that book when it first came out as I was traveling down the Oregon coast, and obviously Nobel Prize winner, so that was a fantastic book. And now there's a new book by Anthony Doerr, which is The Cloud Cuckoo Land. And this one's science fiction themed book by the author, not Pulitzer, is it Pulitzer or Nobel Prize? Now I have to look it up. It's a winner of the Pulitzer Prize. So the Pulitzer Prize, Nobel Prize takes a little while to earn. You got to write a few books for that one. So Pulitzer Prize, big award. Anyways, not talking about awards here. Talking about this particular book, which looks to be quite interesting. So this book here is this is a case where the author has earned my trust as an author, so therefore I want to read the new book that comes out by the author. A good example of that, well, it's coming up in a moment. But this particular book here, looking forward to reading it, fairly new book. So that's definitely on my going to be read in the next couple of months pile. The next book on my list is one, again, modern science fiction, relatively modern science fiction, that many, many, many people have read. And this is, again, part of a series of books I'm excited to read. And I picked this one up when it first came out, but I never got around to reading it. And please don't flame me in the comments. And that is Red Rising. So I want to read Red Rising for a couple of reasons. One, fantastic book from what I understand. People rave about this particular book. They rave about the series. They particularly rave about the second book in the series, which I believe is called Golden Sun. So I'm jumping into the series with the first book of the series, see how this one works out for me. I'll definitely follow this up with Golden Sun at the very least, and then continue throughout the series as far as it goes, or as far as I'm interested in it. And this particular book is one that, again, gets a lot of recommendations. It's one that's been on my list for a while, but now it's been moved into my next couple of months. I'm going to be reading that book. Now, the last book that I'm going to have here, and there could be many more, but this is sort of what I call my immediately reading pile. So this is going to go, let's get on to these books. These are books that I've either waited too long to read, or they're books that, for whatever compelling reason, I want to read them in the short term rather than the long term. But this book here is Walk Away by Cory Doctorow. Now, this particular book I'm interested in, not because of this particular author having, earned my trust, so to speak. I haven't read any books by Doctorow yet. So this will be my first book, and you can comment below. Is this a good book by him? Is this his best book? Is this an enjoyable book? This will be interesting. So I'm going into this one a little bit blind, but thematically I'm very interested in this because I've just recently finished reading Visit from the Goon Squad and The Candy House, which are based upon sort of near-term, I would almost call it startup or incubator science fiction, where it's sort of that technical culture that we live in, sort of a culture of, startups. It's very similar in some ways. So you have the Visit from the Goon Squad and you have the Candy House, and you could almost go in talk about books like Ready Player One, where it's sort of a almost slightly cyberpunky but incubator startup kind of environment. I think this book is along those lines. So I think this book is along the lines of science fiction that's an extrapolation of almost near-term or current scientific knowledge and technology culture. I could be incredibly wrong. I have no idea. So I'm reading from a book flap in terms of what I think this book might be about. I need to go into the reading with an open mind, and I will, but that's definitely on my list of books that'll be read in the near term. So I have a series of books here that I'll be reading. I'll do reviews on some of them. We'll see. I might contextualize them along with some other books. I may abandon books. That's a whole other story. If I don't like a book, I'm not afraid to walk away from it. That's another video that I have on the channel, or I will have on the channel shortly. But there's my reading stack for the next probably 2-3 months when it comes to science fiction. Let me know what you think of my choices. Are there books that are glaringly obvious that I should be reading? There's probably hundreds of those, so maybe we'll avoid that. I don't need any more recommendations at the moment, but you never know. I could wander past a bookstore, or I could all of a sudden read a book that prompts me to want to read another book. And now that I think of it, Dune Messiah is kind of inching its way in here. I have to be careful when I walk past my bookshelves because, nobody has a library of books that they've read. They have a library of books that they've read, but a huge or a larger library of books that they want to read. So these are the ones that I'll be reading in the next couple of months. Comment down below if you've read any of them, if you think I'll enjoy them, if I've made some choices that I should be avoiding, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.